Death is a hell of a subject to tackle, whether your medium is film, literature, and even video games. Now, to be fair, games have never shied away from this topic in particular. I imagine a lot of your first memories in video games might have involved smashing a Goomba flat, or stabbing a goblin with a shortsword. No, games are not afraid to throw in the blood and guts. But it's far more rare when games tackle this subject in a direct, straightforward sort of way. I think that's the reason experiences like What Remains of Edith Finch stick with us. Death isn't an abstraction, it's a very cold and calculating reality that fascinates us almost as much as it creeps us out. For that reason, I was excited by the idea of a Mortician's Tale, a game where you aren't killing outside forces, you're preparing them and observing the living as they mourn. I can't think of the last game that drew me in with such an interesting, morbid topic. And I can't think of the last game that pulled the rug out from under me in such an unfocused, disappointing fashion. A Mortician's Tale was developed this year by Laundry Bear Games. It concerns you, a young woman named Charlotte, who is the newest addition to the Rose and Daughters funeral home. Every day you receive a new body with a new story. It's your job to prepare the body, whether through embalming or cremation, and allow visitors to pay their last respects. The gameplay itself feels a lot like other doctor-based games you may have played in the past, which makes sense considering the subject matter. Click and drag with your scalpel to make incisions, shave the body, clean it, and so forth. This makes sense, but I was put off a bit by the fact that the game never lets you do anything without explicitly telling you how to do it, no matter how many times you've made these actions before during the game. I initially thought that this was a tutorial section or something like that, but it stayed throughout. After the body's prepared, you attend the funeral and pay your respects. This is where the game was the most engaging, as it gives you the option to listen to the mourners as they speak in the sometimes strange, sometimes predictable way that mourners react. One of them is racked with guilt over a recent argument that she and the deceased had. Another can't get over how good the crab cakes are at the service. Anyone who's ever been to a funeral or a wake has seen this cornucopia of reactions. Tears, laughter, and nostalgia all come in equal parts. Hell, I've seen flirting at a funeral. There's really no wrong way to mourn, apparently. I think the best funeral service moment came after you cremate the body of a homeless man who was brought to you. When you open the door to attend the wake, there's no one there to mourn him. It's just you. And it's heartbreaking. These moments are very effectively done. Laundry Bear should be proud of them. And they are sorely needed in a Mortician's Tale because there is next to nothing else to recommend it for. As I mentioned before, the gameplay holds your hand and guides you through each and every preparation, no matter how many times you've done it. Not that you can have done it many times, as this game took a whopping half hour to finish. All in all, you can't fail at your job. No matter how long it takes you to click on those guides for your sewing needle, there's never going to be a moment where you slip and stitch a dead body's lips to its nose and have to explain that to horrified family members. I don't know if the opportunity to fail or otherwise do a good job on the embalming and prepping of corpse would have been appropriate, given the tone of the game itself, but at least it would have been something interesting in the gameplay. Those sad moments with mourners are held together by the barest string of a plot, a boring cliché shell of a story that involves your little mom-and-pop funeral home being taken over by a greedy corporate funeral giant, which, yeah, I'm sure that's probably a real thing, even though I don't really have experience with it myself. But Christ, it's such a well-worn plotline that it feels like it was stolen from every 80s movie ever made. I kept expecting Val Kilmer and the big-faced kid from Real Genius to come in and start ranting about the purity of their science before the man gets his hands on it. And all of this is further exacerbated by the artwork that goes with A Mortician's Tale. Hear me out. Take a look at the artwork that represents our hero Charlotte. She's a beautiful, mysterious, tattooed goth chick. And I got no problem with that. Not on the surface. Some of my favorite people in the world are beautiful, mysterious, tattooed goth chicks. But this is the game's representation of her against a storyline in which we learn almost nothing about her. She's a boring blank slate, a Bella Swan in a pair of rubber gloves. She never makes any bold choices when you're playing her. We never hear her inner monologue or learn anything of any great value about her. The only things we know about Charlotte are based on the emails she receives from her friends and coworkers who seem to think that she's pretty cool. I don't know exactly why this aspect of the game bothered me as much as it did. If I had to guess, I think it would be the idea that this artwork completely undercuts the theme that Laundry Bear is trying to create for us. A somber, thoughtful look at the notion of life and death. In the game, you're a mute tabula rasa of a human being, but according to the artwork, you're like Death in a Sandman comic. I want to emphatically state there is nothing wrong with having characters who are sexy or bold, but it doesn't fit when you're trying to project that aesthetic onto a character who has none of those traits, particularly when the overarching theme of the game is one of true mortality. There are so many places a Mortician's tale could have gone with this. What about when Charlotte screws something up and has to deal with inner guilt and an angry family? What about when she has to balance her life of death with the prospect of a family and relationships? What about when one of her friends dies and she has to prepare their body? Instead, they just went with an exhausted storyline that ends in an advertisement for green funerals. Not that I have a problem with green funerals, they're great, they're natural, Google them. Green funerals, awesome, do it. When you die, I mean. There are so many different ways that a setup like this could go, but Laundry Bear was content to stick with a bog standard, the mean old corporation came in and took over, and we're taking advantage of people. Now don't get me wrong, the notion of upselling people who are vulnerable and in pain is a ghastly thing to think about. However, it's a ghastly thing to think about that I've seen covered in hundreds of movies, books, and other pieces of entertainment. A Mortician's Tale had a chance here to take their incredibly effective moments with mourners and deliver something longer and more effective, and they dropped the ball. For a half hour, A Mortician's Tale delivers a few sad and engaging moments, but it's very difficult to get over what might have been.
If Daddy don't sink a little drinky, Daddy gets sad and blue. Sneak a little drinky, sneakity-doo. Sneak a little drinky past you. Sneak a little drinky, sneakity-doo. Sneak a little drinky